Hi everyone! Welcome to Working with Designers, a podcast where we discuss how businesses and designers work together to make an impact. I'm Kristin Silva, and alongside co-host Jake Cooper, we're here to share our insights gathered from 12 years of working as professional designers, as well as the gripes, humor, and discussion that goes on behind the scenes. So let's dive in.
Little dog hour.
Yeah.
So, random side note, I'm making quiche right now.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
What got you thinking about quiche for the name of your business?
Oh my God, this isn't like it's kind of a funny story. I don't know if it's like a good story. So I got really ill as a child on quiche.
Oh, really?
And so I don't have a good association with quiche. But when we were in school and we were learning type, I loved writing it because it's such a beautiful, Q's are like an outlier in typography, and then also like QUICHE. It's just a beautiful thing to write out in script.
Yeah.
And so when I wanted to go into mission-driven consumer packaged goods, I was like, oh, this is a perfect way to kind of put a positive twist to the one. Well, there's very few. I'm not a picky eater. And so I think stubbornly, I'm like, like, why is this got to be so tarnished for me? But no, I've been warming up to it since, though. And it's a funny storyline. Yeah.
That's so funny.
So.
It is, though. It is a nice, word to write out for getting deep into typography. Those Q's, man. Those Q's.
Those Q's. Yeah, and it's tongue-in-cheek. It's cheeky. It's kind of, I'm quirky, I feel like. I don't know. So I just was like, so.
Yeah, it's not like a word you hear in casual conversation a lot. Yeah.
No, you don't. So how was your week? So you're making quiche?
I'm making quiche. Yeah, I always watch Great British Bake Off ever since it started airing on Netflix years ago. They did like a little pie competition or something. It was Pie Week or whatever. And I noticed that they have all these like different sized pie dishes than we normally cook with. They're usually like a bit smaller, a bit more like personal. And I'm a single dude that can't eat a whole pie by himself or shouldn't. So I was like, I like this idea of small pie dishes. And I found some on Amazon and was like, I'm going to learn how to do this. And I made some 6-inch pies and 6-inch quiches that are in process of being baked after this episode.
I love that.
Yeah.
Do you find that smaller sizes are easier to work with?
No, but they're easier to freeze and keep around.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, if I made a regular size pie, I would just end up eating all of it by myself, and that's not so great. But if I had
fair enough
smaller, more 2-piece pies, as this one will make, I could put one in the freezer or give one away more easily. Yeah.
Nice. We have a thing in our family where we have excessive birthday cakes. Birthday cakes are so huge. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I bought this in similar fashion. The like kind of expandable side, I don't even know what they're called, dishes where you can literally change the diameter of whatever pie you're trying, or
like a springform pan?
For like a springform, very, very much. But you lay it on like a standard like baking sheet, and you have, it's just, you can kind of change the diameter, and it's really nice because you can tailor the size of cake to whatever size the birthday or party is. So
that's great. I love that.
we have, or maybe I'm saying we as in it's like my entire family. We never had a rule growing up. I'm going to still blame it on them. We never had a rule growing up that we couldn't eat it for breakfast the next day. So like, from what I remember, the majority of us eat birthday cake for breakfast for the rest of the week. So that's also why. But anyway.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
So that.
So you've been onboarding a couple clients. You're pretty busy right now?
I'm pretty busy right now between
Cool.
like developing the business and getting that off the ground and producing marketing stuff and client work. It's just been a real 80-hour work week, but it's good. I'm really hitting the ground running with all this stuff. So it definitely eases some of that sustainability question of like, where am I going to get the people to come do this? How am I going to make the money? It's like, just keep your head down, keep working, and people show up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How
Yeah.
about you? How's your week been?
It's been good. It's been good. I feel like I find it as like a 3-piece wheel, if you will. So you've got your focusing on delivering whatever you're delivering for your clients.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have outreach and networking and making sure that you're top of mind in people's kind of heads. And then you also have that marketing or that nourishing component that goes with that outreach or going out and talking and networking and stuff. So I feel like we're always between those 3 hats.
Right. There's always something to do.
Always.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. And not something that like I was really prepared for by school. Like I thought I really learned how to do design in school and working professionally for almost a decade, but it's a totally different like skill set, just putting your name out there and trying to garner that kind of attention to get people into what you're doing. So I totally respect the people that have been out there grinding, putting the hours in on the business side. I definitely have a new perspective now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally different when it comes to whether you want to do small or big clients, or if you end up having a combination of the two. Trying to manage that is pretty fun.
Fun question mark.
So very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, things are good over here. Weirdly, I'm like very manageable right now. Usually
good.
I'm like overwhelmed. I think last year I took on more than I could really handle, if I'm being totally honest. I mean, it was a lot. And then this season I have one really big client right now, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. It's amazing how like the size of the client can dictate how much your energy is getting pulled in all these different directions.
Yeah. I mean, it's never sustainable to have one large client because if they go away, you know, but I'm taking it for what it is right now because, oh man, if you only knew, if I could put you like a fly on the wall of last year, it was just, we had a lot going on.
Yeah.
So,
especially with
I'll
like,
take it.
you have 2 people that you regularly work with too? Or is it bigger than that?
Well, yeah, I work well. So when I started the business, it turned into, I mean, you know, at the very beginning it was me, and then it quickly turned into 2 people that worked underneath me for the majority of every project. And then and in different capacities. So one of them was on the strategy side, and then one is more on the creative design side. So sometimes they would overlap, but often they would work with me, but it would be in 2 different avenues. And then, you know, through COVID and I don't know, whole other things, we changed it into a collective. So I have a lot of hands on all projects, but not as critical as like the original like trio that was built. So it's a little more flexible and interchangeable. So I don't know, we could go on about this in another call, but the way that we filter and cycle and collaborate on projects has dramatically changed.
Oh, wow.
So I can be very light and lean. I can be like a consultant and be pretty nimble. but then I can also not be lean at all. And, it really depends. It depends on how much work we have, the type of work we have,
Yeah.
So I don't say no to really awesome small clients, but I also don't say no to really big, cool people too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more kind of about how that structure evolves. And I'm sure that's a whole nother day's conversation. But I imagine it's got to be really tough when a company of 3 people, 4 people is busy rather than just you yourself being busy. It's got to be a lot to manage. So this whole new year, this whole new energy of work is nuts.
Yeah. It's not we'll go into it on another call. It's not as complex as I think you might think it is, but yeah. So I put together kind of a list of some notes. I know you wanted to talk about some things as well. What are we talking about today? You want to start it off?
Yeah. So I think one of the questions that people ask me a lot when I start working with them is they're really curious about how much branding their business actually needs. And the more that I think about it, the more it's so subjective based on the client and their situation that it's not such a cut and dry answer, that it might be fun to kind of get into it on this episode today. So, Kristin, when people ask you, how much branding do I need? What do you respond with?
Well, I would say that the way that I think of it is I probably know a little bit about the client before, the question is either asked, or whether it's asked or not, it's the situation. And I think that comes down to where that person or that company is in their business. So there's a couple scenarios that I like to think of when thinking of answering this question. And those scenarios include a freshly new business entity, someone that's actually been in business and is now looking to grow, someone who's, or some company that's very established. That would be the third. And then there's also situations that happen where has the company, has a reputation been tarnished? And what does that look like? And then there's another one where maybe it's a growth phase within the kind of mid-tier that I discussed. And the growing company, if they're rapidly growing, then there's an indication of a type of investment that I would recommend.
Yeah, almost like a buttoning up. You're going to start scaling, you need some tools that can grow with you rather than keep you locked in a certain space.
Yeah, I think it has to do with systems too, the bigger that the company is. So if the company is it really depends. It depends on how it's being grown, If it's the market demanding something, is it a temporary demand? Or is there more going on where they're actually making moves to go from, say, a $10 million enterprise to a $15 million enterprise? And that $10 million entity is not going to be doing the same things as a $15 million or so forth. So a lot of strategy there. There's another subcategory with new business where it really depends on, the startup scene, where you are in your research and development of your product, because there's only so much that, at least from my perspective, that I would really want to invest in from a identity lens, while research and development is still being ironed out, because that really indicates a lot too, right? So
yeah, you don't want to put yourself in a box too early. You want to really have something that is broad enough that as you create new service lines or products, or maybe you shift up who your audience is, you want something that's still authentic to you, but is a bit flexible.
Yeah, and that's not to say that to shy away from branding in early stages either.
Right.
I think that that's the opposite of what I mean by it, but that there's certain things that you definitely want to invest in after research and development, and the things that you want to invest in beforehand are a little different and are a little more wide net, if you will, as opposed to narrow netting.
Yeah, it's almost like there's kind of the internal focus, the internal branding aspect, and then the external, where you're focusing more on audience rather than, your own evocation of your intentionality, like your own articulation of purpose.
Yeah. So I need to put this in front of me because I just want to see where we want to lead with this.
Yeah.
But, when you think of, to kind of spit it back to you, I'm curious to know, I sort of charged at this on like what my beginning brain thinks of when thinking of how much branding do I need. Where do you land? What is your initial reactions when you hear, hey Jake, how much branding do I need?
I think it's a really telling question when you're asked that, or when someone starts thinking about that. It's almost like a little defensive, where you're like, well, I don't need that, I don't need this. But depending on like where your company is at, it can really depend on what you're trying to change. Like if you're struggling with awareness, you're probably still in that early phase where you just need to get a consistent image out there. And that can lead you towards maybe working on like some websites, some brand guidelines, things that can keep you systemized and getting it out there, versus if you're more further along in your business, you're going to be wanting to cater to those repeat customers so that you can develop trust and focus on that kind of area. I find that like brands tend to go through a similar lifestyle. You crawl before you walk. When you're crawling, you're kind of in this building awareness phase where you're really narrowing down on consistency and presence in those audience spaces, versus when you're in the second walking phase, you're trying to get more results down, get your testimonials, and like really articulating who your target audience is rather than casting such a broad net. And the end goal is really like building out brand loyalty and brand loyalty, like trying to really get a handle on, what's the long view of people that interact with your brand? How can you reach them on that kind of pure inspirational, emotional level and keep them coming back for more, and like find something inspiring within you? And I wouldn't recommend starting there right out of the gate because there's so much groundwork to start with. So when I get that question of, how much branding do I need? It's kind of I would give back the question, what do you need to work on? What kind of changes are you looking to make in your business? And that'll set you on a course for figuring out how much brand you actually need.
Okay, so this is interesting. So from what I hear, you're more pitched to hearing this question when someone already has an established brand, or they've made some kind of movement where they've maybe stumbled, or they're trying to kind of pick up the pieces on either what went wrong or what's missing, or why aren't people calling me, or whatever the case may be. Is that correct?
Yeah, I feel like the entrepreneurs that I work with, and some of the teams that I work with that tend to be, on the smaller side and trying to kind of wear a lot of different hats, they have this mentality of like, move fast and break things, like just really try and get whatever the minimum viable whatever is out there, to the point where like brand is always an afterthought or like a nice to have. And I want to show up and tell them, this is more foundational, more important than you're letting it on to be. You really want to build a system that you can rely on so that as you scale, you have the foundation in place to actually execute. When you are creating different products, you're creating different marketing campaigns, what have you? Do you have those kind of core resources and messages tied up so that it's not, starting from square one? I like to think of it as like, you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. That kind of words of wisdom thing.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up that analogy because I feel like we're always full of them, and I love it. The one that I like to think of is actually like when you think of like potted plants, I guess. And so, to keep a plant alive, at some point you're going to need to change the soil and the environment and the watering frequency. And the more it grows, the more that you're going to need to tend to it, or kind of, not in like a high maintenance way, don't go out there getting orchids here, but I'm just saying, I think sometimes people think that branding is also like a set it and forget it sort of situation.
Yeah.
And there's definitely aspects of branding and things that, tools and practices that we do to make sure that the image and the direction and the cadence of what we're developing for a client, as as I know, is long lasting and sustainable, but that doesn't mean that it's a set it and forget it sort of thing too. So
yeah, it keeps evolving, it keeps growing, and you need some sort of infrastructure so that you're not constantly reinventing the wheel. And that's what I see happening when clients approach me. They're like frustrated that it's taking so long to get things done, or they're spending too much money trying to redo projects that don't feel right. And they're like trying to find the answer of how can we get it right the first time. And it's usually, this is a brand problem. It's not a ad problem. It's not the deliverable you're thinking of. It's more strategic, and it's worth investing in finding those long-lasting answers rather than the immediate solution.
So if I was to plug myself, can we do like a scenario?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I guess I'm the client, and I'm inquiring, for your services because my website isn't really like gaining any traction. I did everything I could. I even worked with like a junior designer. I don't have a lot of money, so I kind of worked with someone in the field, but maybe not someone that's like senior level. I think my website looks pretty good, and I'm not getting any leads. Where would you point me?
Yeah, if you're not getting leads, it might not be the website at all. It might be, how you put yourself out there. It might be your social media marketing, your content. Your website could be fine. It could be converting on the right ratio, but just not getting the right volume of people to it for you to actually see the results you want. But I would say let's look through your website and talk about what's your idea of the message and purpose of your company. And I'll kind of look through it and see if that message is getting across and if there's opportunities to kind of better represent those ideas and yourself to make it appealing to that target audience. But it's that kind of brand level infrastructure that I want to make sure you have in place as the client so that you can build this movement, this creative in the right direction rather than just giving you a new template for your website.
There you have it.
Yeah.
Little nugget.
That's the working with designer nugget deliverable of the day. I like the phrase.
Well, I was going to go even further, and I was like, no, let's not do that. I think that's plenty.
I could go further if you want. I'm happy to.
Well, I could do one more and be like, well, okay, this is like me pretending to be client again. Well, Jake, I understand that, but I have a really active social media. I have tons of likes, but they're not converting either.
It could be that you don't have the right engagement from the right audience. It could be you're attracting a lot of interested people, but not people that are actually going to take advantage of your service. So it could be a matter of providing different types of content that speak to the customer needs of your actual target audience rather than what's getting traction online. There's so many like social media gurus out there now that are like, write your post in this template, it gets 10 times the clicks or whatever. And I'm like, that's great. It's not getting me clients. You need more than attention. You need action. And our goal is to help understand what gets you that action on an emotional motivating point. And that's where the brand kind of comes in, is understanding how you relate to your audience. What is that story they need to hear to get them to see the value in what you're doing? And if you're getting a lot of clicks, you're getting a lot of likes, but not a lot of customers, that might be why. So I guess the service response to that would be, let's dive into your analytics. Let's look at what's going on. Let's see your messaging, and we'll build a program.
Yeah. And I think also in that specific scenario, I would argue that, it really, likes don't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
No?
At the end of the day, it's how many people are booking, how many people are making that purchase.
I shouldn't say that they don't matter. There is a surface level of reputation, of course.
Sure. And it means that your message is valid. It's getting a response. The question is, are you getting the responses you want?
Yeah.
Like getting an audience is one part of the challenge of building a long-term brand. The other is to motivate them to take action. I think the third question that's kind of relevant to that hypothetical is, well, how much does it cost? What's my budget? I only have so much. And I think the response would be, we want to figure out what's going to give you the longest term impact based on the amount of investment you can have. So many people focus on the deliverable. Like when we started in this example, we talked about a website. It'd be one thing to redo a website, and that has a certain cost and a certain investment. But if we invested all that money when you really had a social media problem, what's the point? So we really got to make sure that you're investing your money in the right spaces for the right size of business that you are and the right size of brand that you're currently at, so that you can make moves that actually, push the needle. Have you ever had situations as in Studio Quiche where they thought they wanted one thing and you had to kind of convince them to move in a different direction that might in the long term be better for them?
I would say that the most situations that I come about is that a client thinks that they need this one thing, and that one thing turns into 2 or 3 things, as opposed to being totally a different scenario. Yeah. So I would say, I can't think of one specific, there isn't something strong in my mind that was like a total table flip of a situation. I would say that there has been opportunities where a client will come to me and say, I really want to work on this website, and I'll be like, what assets do you have to pull from? You know what I mean? Like they really didn't flesh out any branding, and they kind of want to do that in a reverse, or kind of work on seeing what we could pull from nothing for a web and then flip it. So there has been moments when I've been with a situation or been in a dynamic where a client, it was very difficult to sell the foundation of branding before, the asset development and the systems and having guidelines before a web project.
Yeah.
But
I feel like there are people that get really zeroed in on one specific thing that they believe they need when when you have some kind of external perspective, you can look at it and say, maybe we should invest over here first, or let's build up these assets and then integrate it, rather than trying to reshuffle the same 10 things you already have.
Yeah, and also I try to be pretty flexible. I mean, when I'm talking to someone new, if they come to me with this strong sense of need of a specific thing that I can deliver them, I try to meet them at least halfway in understanding, because I mean they're in their shoes every day, you know what I mean? So if there's something that's going to empower them, I mean, part of branding too, and not like a huge part, but like a good chunk of branding is empowering, like empowerment. Right?
Totally.
And the confidence to be able to deliver and believe in what you sell.
Right.
So I do think that there is moments when I've had projects come my way and I've just been kind of surprised with what they want me to like invest in. And I'm like, this is awesome. Yeah, let's do it. But also, it really depends. It depends on their end goal.
It's not like they're always like looking in the wrong direction, but I think part of being a good brand strategist, brand designer is like letting the customer understand that they are the most knowledgeable person in their business, but also showing up as someone to be that sounding board of, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Because as much as like there are people that zero in on one thing and really should be focusing elsewhere, there are more people that know the right thing, know what deliverable is weakest, that needs the most help, like as they come in.
Yeah, I agree.
So when somebody comes to you about investing in branding, like how can they start having a plan? Like where should they begin if they're considering investing in a brand?
Well, I do like to talk to them about having a yearly budget of some sort, and it can be even on like a small side, but I do think that it's my job and my responsibility to just remind them that there they are.
Yeah, there it is.
Is that your dog?
Yeah, that's
the afternoon bark.
I was like, she hears your dog. Nope, I have headphones on. That's all her.
No. Yeah, so I think it is my job and responsibility to educate the client in understanding that brands are not, websites, identities, messaging documents. Like none of this is set it and forget it. You can have a really long stretch with the same thing for a long time if you constantly nourish it, constantly review it. You should review your materials probably annually, to be honest.
Yeah.
If you can.
Yeah, regular check-in.
And I think also marketing goes with that, right? So it's like, I think especially at this time in the digital age, and I can't speak for what was happening 50, 60 years ago, but I would say that nothing
it's like,
against
I can't
that.
speak for what was happening 10 minutes ago.
Well, you know what I mean, though, where it's like, when you develop a website, when few people had websites, that was probably, you didn't really have to really think of like the marketing and the activation of campaigns around them and email drip campaigns and
you can really branch out in a number of different like campaigns and things that before was just your website, but now it's newsletters and social media and courses or all these things.
Well, it's important to activate those, well, I call them anchor items, right? So like in the branding scheme, we develop anchor materials, whether that's your print collateral, if you're still using that, and I know that's kind of having a comeback right now, or your digital platforms that are where you find the information of the company, whether that's their LinkedIn page or their website or their product listing on some other larger entity. But yeah, so I think like trying to figure that out, of course, and where people are investing on a yearly basis anyway. I mean, I think that's where I start the conversation, is just understanding their budget. And if they don't have a budget for specific items, or if I can get them into a position where we can review their marketing budget together, I like to make suggestions on what I think would be important and not waste their time or money, of course,
Right.
but
just like
what would be
prioritize, like,
valuable.
if you only have so much, here's where it should go, kind of conversation.
Yeah, because I mean, the idea is that your branding material will help carry the weight of all the rest, the sales, the marketing, and so forth. I mean, it's not going to be able to complete all of your cycles of business, but by having it say the right message at the right time with the right people, I mean, you should be having less questions on the customer service end and line, and more buy-in, more trust immediately, faster approvals. I mean, it should all make sense and work.
I mean, that's where people can find the value in branding. It's like, it's not in literal dollars all the time, but it's time saved. It's customers understanding your product better and alleviating the need for like an on-call salesperson to walk them through the entire pitch of what you do. Like, when I feel like people think that calling branding an investment is kind of the wrong term, that like you don't really invest, but it is something that like you build up, develop, and it pays off over time. It is something you can really like refine, and get different results from the more you put work into it. So yeah.
Yeah. So if you were, to find a designer for yourself, which wouldn't happen, but if you were, where would you find people like you?
I mean, I think most people would start just by searching, their local town and designer, or maybe you would do marketer or website developer, whatever that need was. But I would also talk about word of mouth, like ask people around, like you must know not you must, but you probably know other business owners in the area, and you like the websites that they work with. It might even be a good opportunity to reach out to, peers in your local group that maybe you don't have a relationship with yet, but you want to ask, like, oh, I like your website. Who developed it for you? Maybe I can reach out to them, kind of thing. I think there are people all over that you wouldn't think of that are in the design space that would love to work with you. And you probably know somebody that's worked with one. I'm just thinking, like, you probably know somebody who knows somebody, like this weird network of people. Yeah. So and the other thing is, you don't have to refine yourself just to local either. I mean, if you find somebody you really admire their work, they could be in an entirely different state. They could work, in another country from you. That's the amazing part about our career, I think, is that we're completely mobile. We can really design things and get them to you no matter where we are. So there is not a limit on the talent that you want to find.
Yeah.
How about you? Where would you, I know it's weird because we're both designers to be like, where would you go and find other designers?
I'll tell you where not to look. Don't look at your family or friends.
No. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's just too weird.
It's just, I don't know. I think it's just bad practice.
Yeah.
I think it's something we need to exercise out of our, like, nepotism is just like such a past thing.
Yeah, nepotism. It also, like, there's always this weird tension of like, how much do I charge for this? I don't want to screw over somebody I like. I don't want them to feel taken advantage of or get taken advantage of by them. It's hard.
Yeah, I just don't think you have like your professional cap on all the time when you have friends and family around you. And I think they should be totally separate. But I have a strong feeling about that.
It's almost like a therapist. Like, you can't go to your cousin to be your therapist. It's just too close to home.
That's going to be an interesting, everyone's going to know.
So what do you think Aunt Linda's about? Like, what was that all about last
Well,
week?
let me tell you.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, so I think like establishing a plan, and then also once you figure out some sort of marketing budget, and if you don't, then, you can start looking at networking opportunities, look at,
Yeah.
Designers are found in cities.
Yeah.
Should we just say these things, Go to a
Yeah.
concentrated area and you're going to find an art scene. I
Right.
don't know,
Throw a rock, you'll hit a designer.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, and just what is your local city's networking events like?
Yeah, you know what? You might want to look into there are young entrepreneur and small business owner meetups that I go to as a business owner that, if I found somebody that was looking for web work there, I'd be all about it. So there's probably existing, networks or networking events that you could attend, and there are likely some creative folks there.
I should say also, too, outside of the whole cityscape, I think a very, what is it called? Underrated scene is chambers of commerce.
Yeah. 100%.
But I think networking opportunities in general, like any networking, that's a great space.
Yeah.
Going to opening, I know this is kind of maybe unique, but art gallery events and the art scene, film festival sort of events. You'll find a lot of artists and designers, and then also just go online and look up people that you really admire and their work, whether that's on Behance or on Instagram or
Behance,
whatever.
Dribble, Instagram, even Pinterest, though results may vary. But I feel like you could really cater your search
Pinterest
to your...
is a weird thing, but yeah.
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 I've heard...
Pinterest is the same algorithm for everyone, isn't it? The same bespoke California thing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But I've heard a lot of interesting business SEO facts about it that we can chat about.
Do you want to share?
No, okay. It's one of the largest search engines besides Google. And their algorithm doesn't change nearly as frequently as Facebook or Instagram or any of those, or Twitter. They have a very consistent algorithm. So the length of time, I don't remember where I was reading this, but somebody was talking about the half-life of your posts. When you make a social media post, if you're on LinkedIn, if it's not engaged with in the first 30 to 60 minutes, it's probably done. On Twitter, it's a little bit longer, maybe 2 or 3 days. Same with Instagram. With Pinterest, it's 90 days. So you have the potential for something you put on Instagram to be shown to other people for 90 days rather than 1 or 2 on these other platforms.
Are you telling me that I have to start breaking into Pinterest?
I don't
posting
know,
the visuals?
But maybe...
Oh. That's so, it's it's the beige era of design. You know what I mean? It's oh my God. Well, the bespoke, I can't.
Well, that's the thing.
The pastel era, and then the gray beige era, and then they're I can't.
Well, it doesn't even have to be just portfolio work. It could be blog articles with just there are people on there that are searching for information, not just images, which is wild. As a millennial, that does not compute with me, but I guess people are doing that.
It's a visual board, but okay. I'm going to have to look into that now. Okay. So
there's our
find
our
the
side
designers
thought nugget
on
of this.
Yeah. So we've got city networking events, Chamber of Commerce, and apparently Pinterest.
Yes.
Oh, webinars. We can talk about webinars.
Webinars are good.
How did you find... Okay, as a designer, though, quickly segue, because you just recently did a webinar.
I did.
How did you get into... How did that come about?
So I was at a networking event and they were looking for speakers and I just signed up. It was that simple. And I pitched a couple different topics that I'm let me know what you think this audience would get the most value out of. And we landed on a topic, and it all kind of came about from there. So if you're before you're thinking of even like working with a designer and are just curious, you could definitely look into like what these business organizations, or I discovered this networking group where I gave the talk on Eventbrite, or like, I don't know if Meetup's still a thing, but I think you could also find it there. Yeah. So,
I mean, if Pinterest is a thing, I'm
well,
just kidding.
like,
I'll stop.
We're annoying whoever the owner of Pinterest is right now. It's like,
I know,
I'm a
I'm
really big
sorry.
deal.
Pinterest owner. I'll fact check them later and see if I really care.
Mark Schmuckerberg. Yeah.
Yeah. How much are you making? I don't care. Yeah, you're fine. Like, if you're listening to our podcast, I'm honored.
Oh, man. But yeah, I mean,
Anyway,
you could really find designers anywhere, and they can work from anywhere.
Okay, so like when you were getting ready to do the webinar, how did you broadcast that out? How did people find out about your webinar?
So they made ads on or not ads, but like posts on their LinkedIn accounts, and just pushed it to their network and to their subscribers newsletter so that like members could attend and they could invite people. So yeah, it was just a total like media push from all sides. I made some like
so find a networking event, get on their roster, and also shark LinkedIn for local webinars.
Yeah.
Or not
pretty
local.
Much.
It doesn't have to be local. Okay.
Yeah, just join. I mean, I think there's value in joining local groups just because it's connections that you can actually like meet with in person, whether their clients or just peers. Like, it's always nice to have a local group of people. But there are plenty of like groups on social media platforms that you could join and find more information about.
Yeah, and also I would say when you are vetting or trying to find a designer, I think also, and I don't know if this is like steering us away from what we were talking about, but I'll end it with this. I do think I just want to add that when you start meeting these designers and you're considering moving forward, always look at a portfolio from them.
Yeah.
Because regardless of how much strategy or messaging or other, deliverables are more at stake, or more pressing at the very beginning, if you don't resonate with anything in their portfolio, you're not going to resonate with anything that they give you as results.
Yeah.
And that's just like clear indication that you're in the wrong territory and you need to hire someone else.
Yeah.
So definitely be conscious of that.
It almost sounds obvious, but I know so many people that like had a good connection with a designer and was like sight unseen, build me a website, and then they come crying to me that they don't like it.
Agreed. And that's why I'm bringing it up blindly. People will hire designers and not even look at their work. And, I hate to say it, but I think that there is this misconception because I get it all the time. Well, I don't get it all the time, but there has been moments in the last, say, 10, 15 years since art school where people are like, oh, so like, could you do an oil painting? And I'm like, what? Like, we're not one size, this isn't like a one size fits all kind of situation. When you go to art school, there are designers, there are artists, but then within those, there's like all kinds of different specialties. And so I think people don't really understand that sometimes.
Right.
But
like your doctor could paint a landscape for you, but it's not going to be good. It's not
your
gonna...
doctor, your brain surgeon could do something on your stomach, but I don't know if you'd want to do that. You know what I mean? No.
Your butcher could tile your kitchen, but it may not be very good.
These are terrible analogies.
Yeah, I know.
People are like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you want to talk about now?
I was going to say, I think like the number one thing that I feel like you and I would always recommend is investing in a design system. Like, let alone there being a need for a website or a need for, ads or content, all these different deliverables. I feel like it always comes back to having some sort of design system or guidelines or some kind of strategic thing, should we maybe talk about what that is and why we think they're so great?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want me to start with why they're great or what they are?
Either. Yeah.
We'll start with what, I guess.
Yeah.
So a brand guidelines deck, and Jake, feel free to, again, redefine or change this totally if this is not the direction you want to go in.
No, that's good.
I would say, like, so brand guidelines deck to me is just a set of core rules and principles that you're going to use as a North Star to navigate you into the near future and hopefully long distance future of your company.
Yeah.
So when you think of your brand, you should think of your waving flag, right? So what people are going to identify you as, and typically that includes some form of a logo, a color palette, some type rules, so typography, and there might be some additional elements beyond that. That's probably the very bare minimum.
Right.
And then it can go from there.
It's like the smallest little building blocks that can all get eventually rearranged into some bigger construction.
And what I would say is it's really important if you're small and you're starting out and you don't have a lot of money, investment, time, and so forth, that there are designers out there and people that can help you fix, or not fix, but address that situation while you're early on, where you are still identifying some form of a flag, even if it's going to evolve. There's ways to do it very carefully where you don't, go into strongly into a direction that might be problematic,
Yeah. And like, it seems kind of obvious, but if you want to be known for something, you got to be recognizable. You got to be consistent. So having some kind of rule written down, we are these colors, we are these fonts, we are these maybe set of icons or photos that all have a consistent message, are so important, especially if you're a small team, especially if you're a solopreneur where you have to constantly outsource like creative work or really anything that needs some form of branding on it. You need some kind of resource to point to get things to be consistent when you're not fully in control.
Agreed. And I think also too that there are ways to, it's always better to be a little on the under-branded side than over-branded at first. And a designer will help you define what that actually means and how to approach that. Because I think something that, if there's anything that I can emphasize when you're starting out specifically and you decide to go down a direction, that branding is evolution. And even if you have, say, 5 loyal clients, if you decide to table flip that direction and you're like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. It does, though. Yeah. Every loyal person and interaction matters. And so the second that you break that trust and consistency, it's like the same thing as if some human had some erratic behavior or decided to all of a sudden just totally change their entire look. You'd be like, is so-and-so going through a midlife crisis? Like, don't do that to your brand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, but seriously, right? So it's like, believe in what you want to believe in, or, carry your, torch through those early moments, but understand that there's ways to do it in a really eloquent, simple, under-designed way that you can always build on. But if you start going into territory that you don't know what you're doing, it's a headache.
Yeah. And even beyond the visual components that go in a design system, the messaging components, the purpose, mission, vision statements, whatever comprise that kind of introduction to what your brand and business is about, is really helpful for onboarding new staff to your company. I've done specific brand projects that were less about, reinventing their brand and more about distilling it down and solidifying it so that new people that come into the company can get up to speed quicker rather than have to, schedule meetings with 3 different departments just to know, what do we care about? That's what I think is really cool about some of these brand guidelines that you can develop. It's just telling more of a story beyond just like colors, but not that they're
Yeah,
less
to build
important.
off. No, not to, well, yeah, to build off of your point, I think that that's definitely, maybe that's like the early stages of growth
Yeah.
where, you start expanding your team. And so, yeah, then other components come into play where it's like your storyline.
Yeah.
The best billboard you have is your people.
Mm.
Being able for them to eloquently say what you do, how you do it, and feel empowered while they're saying it. Oh my God. An easiest sales tactic to just like check off the list. If you can figure out that little 30-second pitch that everyone has, that, and it's not something that you're going to be like coming in and being like slap on the wrist, this is what you're saying. It's something that you embody and you make part of your ethos and guidelines and so forth, but it's also then your first sales pre-selling mechanism.
Yeah. Just starting on that level from the get-go. Here's what we care about. Here's why we care about you specifically.
Yeah. If you were to pick like some of the things like in a brand guidelines deck, say you're now an established company, say you have like 10 people, you want to grow to maybe 25 people in the next year. Pretty aggressive, but or maybe it's not for some people. I don't know. And, so this is like still a small business, but maybe we don't even need to quantify people because maybe that's problematic. But
just
I
in
guess
general,
what I'm saying,
you're growing.
Yeah. So I guess I'm saying, all right, so you have your sort of your icon and your color palette for most part. It's probably like a smaller color palette, and you've got some type rules, and you also have a storyline. People understand it and it's being spoken and people are, gravitating towards it. What do you now tack onto your guidelines in your perspective?
I definitely think like brand values, brand beliefs, and examples, so that as a new person coming into the company, I would want to know like what's the culture like based on what kind of stuff they put out. Like I want to know what I'm walking into. I like this company, I like what I do, or I wouldn't be applying, but what's the deeper connection there? Like what's their own end goal and interest in making an impact, and how can I be a part of that? That's what I would be looking for in a brand guidelines. And I think that can get covered by having some clearly defined like brand centric values and personality traits.
I love that your first like next ad was something to solve employee retention and like internal, like, because I think also something to bring up that you naturally kind of moved into is that there are two parts to a brand guidelines deck. There are external facing rules, guidelines, and so forth. And then there are internal. And so this is really speaking on the internal lens, right? And how you can use these and leverage guidelines in a way that's going to support and celebrate your people, which are your most valuable resources and assets, of course, right? You can't operate a ship without any crewmen. So
right. Yeah, and it's really it's honestly the same story. Usually, it's the same story. Why you're helping your customer, it's born out of the same values of how you would treat your employees. It's you have a passion for a certain topic, a certain skill, a certain challenge that you want to take on, and people rally behind you both as customers and as employees. That same flag that you're developing, that name for yourself, attracts all types of people, not just customers.
Yeah. I think to add to that on the external side is starting to bring in some marketing material or some kind of even high-end visuals of what your brand actually looks like in different scenarios, whether that is digital, whether e-brochures or website related material or signage,
right,
what people are seeing on the outside. Yeah.
Especially as people start to use it as a tool to, put your brand on other products or start to collaborate with like other vendors or things like that. They'll want to see examples of how should this get applied? How will this transition into something that I'm doing over here?
I agree.
Yeah.
And then for large corporate and established, say you're moving into that category with guidelines, I think a huge part is actually starting to talk about going back to brand architecture, reevaluating reevaluating that, making sure that if you have subsidiaries or if that's when, because typically like large corporate or established companies are really focused on expressing new avenues of growth and opportunity, whether that's products and services. And so then that becomes sort of like a chapter or subchapter of, the architecture, naming conventions might now drop into the guidelines or.
Yeah, I feel like it does kind of depend on like what business you're building or whatever. Like if you have sub brands, that's something you want to build into the architecture. But even if you're like becoming more and more successful and trying to invest more heavily in your brand, I think you would try and incorporate like how your brand adapts to different situations. I think that's kind of the highest level of concern of a brand is how can we both stay relevant and stay topical so that as sort of new changes enter the foray, you can kind of adapt where it makes sense to and have your own spin in response to, like changes. So as you enter maybe like a new social media platform enters, or you're making a transition from print media to digital or from digital to video, you want to still define a unique approach to your specific brand, but that still feels consistent with everything else that's established. And that's where that third level of complexity can get you. And it all kind of boils down, even though it gets more and more complex, it always points back to like, what are those building blocks from the beginning? What are the core beliefs, passions, challenges, audience that got you here in the first place? And just how can you get more specific and get more impactful?
Yeah. How would you say, I wanted to kind of touch on this last bit on brand guidelines. How would you say, how do you instruct, I guess this is going to be an open-ended question, but how do you instruct using them? Do you?
Literally, I like walk them through them and give them like templates that already have things built out so that they can kind of just take the materials and run. But I do also believe that, brand guidelines documents kind of should be self-explanatory. The role of the brand guideline is to kind of explain itself and to make it super clear both how and why all these decisions were made. So I try and take good care when I create brand guidelines to talk about not just how to kind of put this kit of parts together in different arrangements, but, what were the decisions behind them so that people get more involved in, the bigger brand picture of it all. How about you? When you give somebody brand guidelines, do you give them like a walkthrough? Is there some extra like a workshop or teaching that goes with it?
It really depends on the client and the ask, and also how big they are and how much we're kind of like charging at or redefining. I would say that there are opportunities. I'm leaning more and more into doing a workshop where I actually am working with the team that is day-to-day using the material that I provide them and kind of see how they sort of translate it into their material, because I think that's something that isn't really exercised out a lot, at least in my situations, which I wish there was more, and I'm trying to push for more of this, is the more interaction between branding and marketing teams, because marketing pumps things out, right?
Right.
And so, so I think that it's good to have a little bit of a pulse check at first, but also I try to guide like Studio Quiche, our team, and our guidelines to a place where I think everyone wants to have a little bit of a say in it in the end, what things look like and how things go. And so I do try to push for systems that are quite flexible, in the sense that as long as you have a couple of these like overarching elements and you know what not to do, there's still a lot of opportunity to have some small creative freedoms, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you don't want to like put too
that.
many guardrails so that it's completely the same all the time. You want to leave space for people to
for large corporate, you do, for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, for the small, medium business owner, which I think is both of our realms, I think there's plenty of, there's a lot still being sculpted. This is not this fully ironed out, ironclad corporation, you know? So yeah, I think that there should be some flexibility because of that.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if that was you or me, but I just realized that I did not put a noise filter on my
I couldn't hear
emails.
it, so you're good.
Beautiful.
Yeah, mine have been going off too. Perfect. And you know, I want to add before we jump off of that I'm finding the more that I do brand guidelines work, the more I'm kind of instructing people how to use them through the workshop of developing them. Like the more that they get involved in the process, the more they're seeing the value and understanding. Like by the time that we're done building the design guidelines, they know how to use them. Like they understand why they're around. So I think maybe it is important to advocate for getting your designer involved in working with people, with the company, like having that collaborative workshop environment beyond just make us design guidelines and get it back to us.
Agreed.
So you have somebody that's interested in, you know, investing in their brand. Where should they get started? What's maybe the things they should, what's like the homework they should do before hitting that purchase button, that I want to work with Kristin button? How could they approach getting started?
Well, you want me to go through our touch points?
Sure.
So I typically have them fill out a form so that I can understand a little bit more in depth of their needs or what they think they need. And then pending the results of that, I'll have them jump on a call with me specifically, and we'll kind of just walk through sort of the scenario that seems to be what they're looking for and what we can provide. So a lot of it is first just vetting that this is a good client for us to take on. Mm-hmm. Often I would say I don't have a lot of people that we turn away. I think the people that reach out to us know what we're about at this point, and they're pretty much ideal clients. So
that's good branding. That's good branding at work.
Is that good branding, or is that just my voice out there being like, yes, no?
Well, no, you're not turning people away. They know when it's the right fit.
I guess so. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's something that I've been very hard working at. So I'd say, yeah. So I think so I would say that's kind of where it begins, is just kind of trying to collect information collecting on my end and just make sure that I have everything. I do have some sort of questionnaires or worksheets that I can kind of provide them. Yeah. And then through that, we go back and forth and just try to understand things. And sometimes I would say that the prospect to client process can be labor intensive. It really depends. It really depends on the size, the interest, the timeline, and all kinds of other things. I would say that I handle it with some care for sure. Yeah. To make sure.
I feel like so much of design work is just figuring out what the work is, like what the project is.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And what shape it has to take.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about this off air I think I reached out to you actually for your own kind of insight on agile frameworks, but we have been embracing agile frameworks as of late, quite a bit. So that,
nice.
Yeah. So that the end goal might still be something that's in the works while we're working with them, which is great, so great. So
that's kind of what I'm doing now, with this client that I just onboarded. We're doing content design throughout the year, but she is looking for guidance and looking for help. So she doesn't totally know what she wants out of it, just that she wants a certain expectation, a certain certainty that she can get more things done and have it all kind of align. So we're kind of figuring out the goals as we're going. which is interesting.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think it's great. If you can be with clients that are like that, I mean, they really understand that things constantly move, so.
Yeah, and I feel like it also puts the onus on the designer to like really focus on impactful change versus just like checking off the boxes of I made this poster, I made that poster. You're really like working with your client to help them. Yeah.
Well, I think also too, timelines just swallow up these days. It's so easy to swallow up a timeline, especially when you're working with creatives. And also, like, I mean, to support designers in this sense is it's like you're creating something that the client can't visualize, so you're solving that, so it's like I understand that the dilemma that a lot of designers get into with sort of timeline bloat and also scope bloat on the client end. And I think that like the agile framework's great because it just puts, pedal to the metal, man. Let's go. Let's do this, because you're only working on like a sprint at a time, so you can kind of like charge and then recharge and evaluate with the client where to go next, which is great. So I'm totally embracing it. And
there's a book called Sprint by one of the Google founders, I think. Maybe it was the Google design.
I have it.
Yeah.
Is it the blue book? There's a blue book and a yellow book. Yeah, and it goes together.
That one.
That one.
Yeah. Right where my finger
was. I
love
that. Yes. Yeah. I think those are like down to like 5-day sprints. And I'm like, oh my God, I do like a 2-week sprint at a minimum. With all the feedback and stuff,
Yeah, it's great.
I don't know how anyone does it in 1 week, but you have to like clear your whole, like you have to tell all your clients, see it next week, I'm on vacation. But what I mean is I'm with one client. If you do like a single 5-day sprint, oh my God, I'd die.
Or you're like working on one very small thing, which at that point is like, why are you bothering?
It's not a sprint like that. Yeah, it's not like all hands on deck sprint, but
yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess.
So I mean, to go back to your original thought, I have a forum on my site, so people can kind of go through that and
just get in touch.
That starts the conversation.
Get in touch, start the conversation. I think if I were a client and like wanted to do some prep work, I would, and I knew Jake to recommend this to me. Jake would say, think about...
Let's hear it, Jake.
This is just how thoughts in my head happen all the time. I would say, think about the journey your customer goes through in terms of discovering who you are, learning about you, and wanting to get in touch with you. And you'll suddenly find all these different things that need design or are designed or maybe are not yet designed. And that'll give you kind of a roadmap to what should have intentionality behind it. Like if you're getting a lot of people through social media, do I have a template that can help me produce things there? If that takes them to the website, is the website working how it needs to be? If that website books a sales call to tell them more about our information, maybe we should work on the sales presentation. I think just having an audit of like how the different paths customers can take to get to you is a good kind of DIY exercise you could do in prep for meeting with a designer to go through a full strategy if you wanted to do some DIY stuff. Otherwise, just book a call.
Yeah, I think to boil down, like a good indication for me, I think that I like to ask my clients too, that reminds me of your last response there, is that what's the question you're just so sick of answering one more time? If you're answering the same question more than once, something needs to be designed or built for that to solve that question, right? So it's like, make it easy on your customer base.
Especially if that question is, why should we work with you? If they don't have an answer to that question, like your audience doesn't understand that, that's a good place to start.
You mean like trust? Yeah, they haven't established any trust pillars.
Trust or just differentiation. Like what makes, if they don't understand why why work with you over your competitor, that's like that's the most important thing to figure out, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I'm trying to think of like, I think like in our situation, it's just snarky, but it's just kind of like, have you seen the portfolio? Does it give you any movement? If it doesn't, walk away. You know what I mean?
Well, that too. Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of it too,
Yeah. I feel like that's more natural for designers, but if you're in a different like service business, it can get down to individual numbers and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of highly competitive, specifically in the CPG market, there's highly competitive, very accessible products that you can purchase, whether it's like candles. Candles are so competitive, the candle market. And then also, a lot of like soft drinks all of a sudden are like, or, there's just like a lot of like lots of soda water all of a sudden soda water is just piping with competitors.
You know what? Like, you know what? I never consider the actual like chemical, literal changes between product that I buy purely by brand. Soap. I don't know what soap is better or worse. I know like organic soap versus non-organic soap, but like I'm not paying attention to the specific like 99.9% whatever numbers you're putting out there. I just pay attention to your brand. So if you're in a highly competitive field, brand makes a really big difference.
Yeah.
I always buy Dawn because they save the ducks.
I have something that we're going to have to cut, but I'm going to say it anyway. I have a friend that Colin who started Good Ass Soap.
Yeah.
He didn't do it as a joke. They're really beautiful homemade soap. But I'm like, do you know what you did there with the name? He was like, I know exactly what I did with the name there.
That's good ass soap.
I was like, yeah, good.
That's good ass soap.
I thought you would enjoy that.
Yeah.
He's so funny. He's like, he actually does like little comedic like what is it, stand-up comedy here in Newport, but he started Good Ass Soap, and I'm just
that's cool. I like that. I need some good ass soap. We all need some good ass soap. That's some good ass soap. That's the flag I'm waving.
Yeah. Talk about some buzz marketing.
Yeah, right.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're welcome, Colin.
All right.
I don't think we're gonna keep it.
We're keeping this in. We're keeping it all in. Yeah. Why not? Yeah. Off the cuff. Well, I feel like that's a good note to leave on. Get yourself some ass soap. Yeah, get yourself some ass soap. Get yourself a good ass brand. Yeah.
Do we want to talk about like action items?
No. Oh, am I do you want to? Do you have action items?
I don't know.
Am I missing anything?
I mean, trying to think of like what we just like talked about. It's been such a wild week, so I'm like, what's going on? We could cut it there.
Yeah, why not?
All right.
I mean, I have like the little advice thing, but I feel like we gave enough advice.
Say it. Let's do it.
Say it.
Do the advice. Yeah.
So, Kristin, what advice would you give to other?
Oh, you're gonna put it on me now. Okay.
No, I just think like I don't know how to launch into this, but
well, I think some of the analogies that we started at the very beginning, teach a man how to fish, or watering your plants, or I think that again, systems are made to grow with you, but you do need to nourish them along the way.
So if you're in the market, if you've decided you're ready to invest in that branding and you're trying to find the right fit, this is kind of advice that I would recommend you looking for in the designer you end up working with, is kind of those same things that we were talking about. Like find somebody that's going to teach you how to fish, not just give you a fish. Like invest in those systems, invest in long-term solutions and not just individual deliverables. What else? What else am I thinking of? Like, what else were you thinking?
I mean, just starting, I think that it's just we're trying to build awareness,
Yeah.
from the inside. I think that's really what it comes down to for me. I think that if there's anything that I would like to be able to either tell my like younger self or someone that is in business and needs a little help navigating or is just kind of listening to this in like an inquisitive way, I think just spreading more awareness on the several facets and things to consider is what I would want to get out of it.
Yeah. And like layered in that, I would say trust is greater than attention. Don't just like,
oh my goodness.
Don't just like put yourself out there for the sake of doing it. Make meaningful things, period.
Less is more. Yeah. Less is more as long as it's intentional, again, cater to the brand that is you,
Right.
Don't put something, if it's not coming from your heart and your soul, then it's not gonna,
Yeah.
People can see right through it in this digital age too.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody wants to kind of read the same article 10,000 different ways. Like have something you care about talking about.
Also, there's just so much shit in the world that you're reading on a constant basis. That's just total bullshit. Sorry.
No, this is the reality of it. It's like, I don't want to read more of your bullshit.
I notice it too in my own tendencies where you're just kind of feeding into the nature of what these tools were originally designed for, what they're trying to make you use them in. And like, after a couple of reposts, if you don't have anything to say yourself on LinkedIn, I mean, come on. We don't need all these reposts constantly.
Yeah.
I don't know who told me that, but I was like, ooh, am I doing it too much? You know what I mean? I mean, it's great that you want to tout and bring other people up. And that's not to say that you shouldn't, but you should also be providing your own zhuzh, your own juice, your own zhuzh.
That'd be a great name.
Get in
for
there,
design studio.
Put in your au jus. Come on,
Put in the au
do
jus.
it up. People want to hear what you're about. I think for the longest time, I was so concerned about not saying the right thing, or it's just this weird thing, in this last spring, I hadn't gone to a book fair in a while. So I went to the one that they do, Printed Matter has it in New York. And so I went to that and I was talking to someone who was there next to a really great publisher that I love. And they had just published a book. It was on about architecture. And the guy had a stint in real estate before that and so forth. So I was talking to him about it. And I was like, he asked me, I was like, that's really impressive. Congratulating this guy on launching, his own book. That's just such a magnificent thing to do to me. I could never imagine. And he said, yeah, so have you written anything yet? And I was like, and I was like, and my like initial reaction was like, and I asked him, I was like, do you ever get over feeling like you're not old enough to write a book? You know what I mean? Or share your thoughts. And it's like, I think that we should all kind of, especially when it comes to empowering business owners and people that are going out there and kind of like having a stance and having a service and having a product. I think it's really important to realize that much like songs and lyrics, your statement or something, if it's coming from your soul and you're about to say it in some form, it might find one person that it helped that day, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Because that it helped someone at some point in some situation. And I think that propels us into larger community structures and fosters more community. And that's the most important thing. So, yes, it's an oversaturated world, but also, don't be the small, quiet one when there's so much shitty things out there.
Right. There's such a pressure to say things and to say, like, to make a post 4 times a week or 3 times a week. There's so much pressure that, like, if you want to be successful in business, you have to hit these numbers. And it's like, nobody wants to read 3 garbage, LinkedIn posts that are the same as everybody else's. They want to hear your unique take on it. So even if it's not the like cleanest, clearest, best take in the world, if you can make it your take, I'd rather have one of those than 10 of, the same listicles that pop up all the time.
Listicles?
Listicles.
Did you just call it listicles?
Oh, I didn't coin that term. That's not my term. It's an article
really?
That's just like, here's the 10 things about this. Here's the top 5, whatever.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's like BuzzFeed, essentially.
That is a new term I've never heard before.
A listicle.
Yeah, listicles. Well, I think also, that's funny. No, I mean, I think also, too, maybe this is the wrong thing to say to a marketing expert, but I don't know. For me personally, in my own business and my own experience, like, oh my God, fuck the algorithm.
Yeah.
Like, just be done with it. You know what I mean? Just put out there, things that matter when you think of them, and, edit your work before you post it.
For all the like smart, clever things I've posted that I thought were smart and clever and posted online, the things that get the most traction are like the work I've done with other people that just like show off them being great. So it always comes back to like just doing cool stuff for cool people. Gets the most traction.
Truly. Yeah, just keep doing work. Keep doing it.
Oh, one little plug. Maybe I have my copy of it. I don't have it behind me. I don't know where it is.
Okay.
But there's a book called Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. I love this book. And it's all about expressing your process and your work without the pressure of having to conform to certain things or feel the pressure of needing to fit some sort of mold. It's great. I love this book. I love this author. All of his books are excellent. And if you are struggling to come up with what to say, that's a really good book for you. Show Your Work by Austin Kleon.
I don't think I have Show Your Work. I will have to look into that myself.
Ooh, it's good. And he's got another one called Keep Going for people that are burnt out. So there's a whole arc for a creative person to go through.
Honestly, I think because of not being so bogged down by work right now, I feel like I'm not jaded at all. I'm feeling very good.
Good.
So it feels good. But that's good to know.
Yeah.
For
Cool.
people that do. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we should put like a recommendations page or something on our website at some point.
Maybe. I think this next one that we decide to record, I'm going to set up in my little library and see if I can pull some things in at last minute.
Cool. I'm giving
some
inspiration.
Visual eye candy, if you will. I might have to be like, well, I don't have it behind me. These are
this book is all about
this book and that book, but not that book.
Yeah. Never mind this basketball that's sitting weirdly in the corner.
Oh, I didn't even notice, but now I want to expand my view just so I can see it.
That's right. We're gonna have to put this in 2 vertical columns so I can hide my background.
That's hilarious. Well, at first I had this. I don't know if you saw this come into play. Are you on horizontal right now?
I just put it
Can
to
you see
vertical,
that?
but it was on horizontal. How can I do it?
Yeah, I had my speaker in sneaking in, and I was like, oh, I need to update that. So anyway,
Yeah.
Well, in summary, there's a lot of F-bombs and ass bombs in this recording. So
Yeah.
I can't wait. This is going to be a delight for you and I to edit.
Yeah. No edits. Off the cuff.
No edits.
Yeah.
I don't know about
Get yourself
that.
a good-ass designer.
Good-ass designer. Yeah. I also think, too, I'm like, oh, man, do we actually do a bleep, like you said, like a meow and then woof and then...
Yeah, I think that'd be really funny, but it would also probably take a lot of time.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I don't want to add this to our list, but also if it you know what they say, editing is The design.
It's the zhuzh. It's the zhuzh.
It's the zhuzh. We should end on the it's the zhuzh.
It's the zhuzh. Final note of the episode. It's the zhuzh.
It's the zhuzh.
Thanks for listening to Working with Designers. Kristin and I would love to hear from you. Please give us a like and send us your thoughts on whatever platform you found us on. Let us know what questions you want us to talk about in the next episode by filling out our contact form at workingwithdesigners.com. Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.